She was still breathing when he left the room. The nurses stood frozen, unsure whether to rush to her side or wait for his signal. But Elias Vance never looked back. His steps echoed down the corridor like the final beats of a fading heart. Behind him, monitors flatlined. Someone whispered his name, but he didn't stop. He washed his hands slowly, precisely, and adjusted the cuffs of his coat. Outside the operating theater, a junior resident tried to speak. Elias raised one hand and silenced him without a word. "She was already lost," he said. "I simply withdrew the inevitable." At the hospital board meeting the next day, 3 deaths were under review, all from surgeries performed by Elias in the past month. Each one involved an unapproved procedure, each one carried out despite direct warnings. A gray-haired administrator asked, "Dr. Vance, do you believe you're above protocol?" Elias smiled faintly. "I don't believe I'm above anything. I believe everything else is below." Murmurs spread across the table. A woman in a navy blazer cleared her throat. "You signed off on an untested cranial interface." The patient coded 12 minutes later. Elias leaned back. "I didn't make her weak." Another voice chimed in. "You skipped anesthesia prep. You said it would slow you down." He stood, calm, cold. "If you wanted perfect outcomes, you should have built me a perfect world, or made me a god." Silence. Then came the voice. Not from any speaker, not from anyone in the room. It vibrated from inside him like it had always been there, waiting. "Then try again. Where your will meets resistance." And just like that, the pull began. Not metaphor. A real force, wrenching his spine, gut, mind. The floor twisted. The lights flickered and vanished. He was yanked out of the world he knew, dragged through layers of pressure and light. No one else reacted. The room kept existing without him. But he was gone, pulled into something colder, sharper, older. He woke on his back beneath a sky that didn't move. No sun, no stars, just a ceiling of cracked silver clouds locked in place. Around him, fragments of buildings hovered mid-air, rotating slowly like broken satellites caught in a forgotten orbit. Elias sat up. No pain, no wounds. His clothes were untouched. He ran a hand over his chest. Steady heartbeat. Crisp shirt. Clean shoes pressing against soil that felt like powdered glass. He pushed himself to his feet and heard a soft crumbling sound. A flat stone the size of a plate lifted from the ground and floated upward, spinning gently in front of him. He didn't see it at first, but when he raised his arm to brush dust from his sleeve, the stone shifted again, following the motion like a trained animal. He narrowed his eyes, tested it, moved his hand left. The stone obeyed. He froze, then exhaled once. "Of course," he muttered. Reflexive neural interface. No panic, no wonder. To him, it simply made sense. From a nearby ridge, several figures watched in silence. Ragged, wrapped in layers of worn fabric, faces half covered. One leaned toward the other and whispered, "Another one from above. They always fall the hardest." Elias turned his head slightly, heard it, chose to ignore it. He focused again. Another stone, a rusted metal rod. With minimal effort, they floated into the air. He didn't smile, but something in his posture straightened, like the world had just confirmed what he always suspected. He walked forward, eyes scanning the floating debris around him. As he passed the fractured base of what might once have been a temple, a massive triangular slab of marble lifted itself from the ground and hovered beside him, responding to a single gesture of his finger. He didn't question it. He only whispered, "Better materials this time," and kept walking. The path led him into a valley carved between jagged cliffs where a small village clung to survival beneath the weight of chains. The air was thick with smoke and dust, and screams echoed between the stone walls. Creatures moved through the streets, tall, hunched figures with translucent skin stretched over sharp bone, their mouths vertical slits filled with grinding teeth. They cracked whips made from spines and dragged the villagers like livestock. Elias stepped forward calmly, analyzing the scene. He lifted a hand, and a cluster of stones shot upward behind him, hovering like a swarm of knives. One creature turned toward him with a guttural snarl. Before it could move, Elias flicked his wrist, and a spike of debris impaled its chest. Another creature lunged from a rooftop. Elias didn't flinch. A plank of broken wood lifted from the ground and slammed into its side mid-air, sending it crashing into a wall. The chaos spread fast. He walked into the village center without rushing, directing objects with surgical precision. Shackles were snapped, weapons disarmed. The remaining captors fled into the mountains, leaving a trail of blood behind. The villagers gathered slowly, stunned. One of them, a woman with her face marked by soot, fell to her knees. "You saved us," she whispered. Elias looked down at her. "No, I redirected failure." A child tugged on his sleeve. "Are you our king now?" Elias crouched, resting one hand on the boy's head. "I'm the one who knows what should be done. That's all." Murmurs spread. Some called him deliverer. Others stayed silent. An old man stepped forward. His back was bent, his skin cracked and pale. "This place changes those who stay long. There are limits here, even for the strong." Elias turned toward him, eyes hard. "Those who control well don't need limits." The words settled like ash in the air. The villagers looked at each other. One, younger, said almost in a whisper. Caelen heard that. Elias raised a brow. "Who?" But no one answered. Not a word. Only shifting glances, and a silence that felt older than the valley itself. Elias raised both hands, and the broken stones around him lifted instantly, forming a perfect ring above his head. With a tilt of his wrist, they spun, faster, tighter. He stepped forward and the formation followed, orbiting like weapons awaiting orders. But one of the slabs buckled meter, grinding against the others. He corrected it with a thought. Another slipped. The circle collapsed. Pieces crashed around him. He frowned, reset his stance, lifted them again, slower this time. "No system should resist a stable command," he muttered. The air around him shifted, not with movement, but with presence. A single line cut through the stillness, not spoken aloud, but forced into his mind like a needle pushed through fabric. "You are in Naraka." He froze. The stones hovered, uncertain. "Here, control is reflection. You move the world, and it moves back." Elias scanned the sky. "Show yourself." No one answered. Only the voice, calm and merciless. "Your power here obeys your mind. But arrogance bends even power until it breaks." He looked at his own hands, then at the debris, circling with less precision than before. "If the mirror cracks, it still reflects," he said. The voice replied, sharp as a blade drawn too slow. "It reflects, yes, but not what you want to see." The stones dropped again, not violently, as if dismissing him. Elias stood alone with gravity back in place, and for the first time since arriving, something pushed back. The pressure faded. Whatever was speaking had withdrawn. But its absence didn't leave silence. It left questions. Elias hovered just above the fractured ground, arms at his sides, body steady as if the wind itself held him in place. Below, pieces of stone rose at his command. Pillars, broken arches, entire walls once buried, now lifted into clean vertical lines. His control was sharper, more precise. With a single glance, he could realign collapsed towers. With a breath, he could bend rusted beams into perfect arcs. He entered a wasteland where nothing stood untouched. Dozens of statues lay shattered, some still hovering in mid-collapse, their bodies cracked open like eggshells suspended in motion. The air was full of dust and whispers, fragments of memories etched into stone. Elias descended slightly and walked across a broken plaza where massive humanoid figures towered in silence. They weren't native. They wore surgical masks, uniforms, medals. One held a shattered staff. Another had a scalpel frozen mid-cut. He paused, recognizing the shape of a ruined dome nearby. Western architectural style, steel framing, concrete mix consistent with Earth infrastructure. These were not illusions. They were remnants. Evidence that others had been pulled here and failed. On a wall behind the statues, a line was carved deep in a language he still somehow understood. Those who tried to rule lost everything, he exhaled once. Failure of execution, not vision. A dry voice replied from above. I said that once. Before this was mine. Elias looked up. Caelen sat cross-legged atop an inverted obelisk, arms resting on his knees. His cloak shifted slowly with the air, and his face was uncovered this time. Sharp eyes, thin mouth, expression unreadable. All of this? Caelen gestured with his chin to the ruins. I lifted it, rebuilt it, controlled it, until it stopped listening. Elias turned away, uninterested. Then your command was weak. He faced a collapsed archway, the size of a house, and extended both arms. The stones around it vibrated. Dust shook loose. Slowly, the arch began to rise, groaning as it pulled itself together. But halfway up, the left half locked in place. The strain tightened across Elias's forehead. He pushed harder. Blood slipped from his nose. His arms trembled. The arch dropped. The ground shook. He stumbled back one step. Caelen didn't move. You're starting to learn, he said. It's not about lifting. It's about what breaks while you do. The village was in chaos when Elias arrived. Fires smoldered in corners of the plaza, walls half collapsed, homes crumbling under their own weight. The people, tired, thin, suspicious, scattered when they saw him descend. He didn't speak. With a motion of his hand, the fallen beams lifted from the streets, hovering above the rooftops like obedient birds. Rubble rearranged itself, stones stacked into walls. 2 houses rebuilt themselves in seconds. Elias floated above the center, commanding silently, adjusting angles with gestures, correcting flaws mid-air. A child pointed up. A woman dropped to her knees. Some clapped. Others stared in fear. He spoke once, voice echoing. From now on, stay within the boundaries I've restored. Stray outside, and I won't rebuild it again. A man stepped forward. Who gave you the right to decide where we live? Elias turned his gaze toward him. I built the ground beneath your feet. That's right enough. The crowd shifted uneasily. Murmurs began to spread. He doesn't understand how this place works. You can't force it. This world rejects command. Elias raised both hands. The houses shook briefly, then solidified. Weak places resist because they fear structure. I correct what resists. Then, from between 2 rows of rebuilt homes, Caelen emerged. He walked slowly, unarmed, hood down, face lit by the fire's glow. You moved the pieces. That doesn't make them yours. Elias hovered slightly higher. Say what you came to say, or disappear like before. Caelen stopped at the edge of the crowd. I don't come and go. I remain. I am what's left when your arrogance fails to hold. Elias extended both arms. Around him, the earth trembled. Stones cracked. Objects rose. Then you've remained long enough. The wind shifted. Caelen's cloak rustled. His expression didn't change, but the ground beneath them began to split. The duel had already begun. Elias rose into the air, arms wide, palms facing downward as the earth beneath him shattered and split. Dozens of massive stone blocks lifted from the ground, some the size of rooms, others jagged shards, sharp as blades. With a thrust of his arms, He sent them crashing toward Caelen like meteors. Caelen moved with calm precision, stepping between shadows, letting the debris miss him by inches. One block spun in midair toward his back. Without turning, Caelen raised a single hand and redirected it, slamming it into another projectile Elias had thrown. The impact shattered both. Elias roared and launched 5 more, twisting them mid-flight to alter their paths, but Caelen ducked beneath one, deflected a second, and disappeared in a blink of silver static before the third could strike. He reappeared behind Elias and spoke without shouting. "You don't fight me. You fight everything that dares not bend." Elias turned sharply and hurled a wall of marble at point-blank range. Caelen raised no defense. The structure hit him squarely, engulfing his form in a thunderous collapse of dust and stone. The silence that followed lasted only a breath. The ruin began to shudder, then lift. Piece by piece, it pulled itself free from the heap, and each fragment shot back toward Elias at twice the speed. He raised a barrier of floating debris, but it cracked on impact. One slab slammed into his shoulder, another into his chest. The last caught him mid-flight and hurled him backward into a fractured spire. The structure cracked and dropped. Elias fell to the ground, blood now running from his nose and mouth. The battlefield quaked as the floating stones began to drift without control, crashing into cliffs and each other. Above the chaos, Caelen stood once more, untouched, eyes locked on Elias. "You fight like someone trying to erase the evidence that he isn't in control." Elias lay among the debris, his breath ragged, chest rising with effort. Blood smeared his forearms, dripping from cuts along his hands where the stone had resisted him. He reached out toward a broken column, trying to lift it with his mind. It shifted an inch, then shuddered violently before slamming back to the ground. His hands trembled. The air around him, once so responsive, now held weight. He tried again. Nothing moved. Not a whisper of power answered. Across the wreckage, Caelen stepped forward slowly, dragging one leg, his cloak torn, face streaked with dust and blood. He coughed once, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and stopped a few feet away. "You still think control means victory?" Elias didn't answer. He stared at the sky above Naraka, at the jagged horizon and the floating ruins that now drifted chaotically without order. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Slowly, he let his arms fall to his sides. The fragments hovering around him dropped one by one, soft thuds echoing through the ruined field. His knees buckled, and he sank to the ground. He didn't speak, but something in the way his head lowered, in the way his breath slowed, spoke louder than words. Caelen watched him for a moment, then stepped closer and sat beside him, not as a victor, not as an enemy, but as someone who had once done the same. A long silence passed between them. Then Elias's body began to lift, not in defiance, not by command. His body floated gently upward, as if Naraka itself had let go. He rose slowly, arms loose, eyes closed, no tension in his form. For the first time, he wasn't forcing the world to carry him. It chose to. The silence held him midair for a moment longer, weightless above the ruins. Then the pull returned, not violent, not cruel, but absolute. It took him from the inside out. His breath caught, spine arched, and the world bent around him. Light folded inward. Air vanished. Naraka peeled away in layers, like a memory unraveling too fast to grasp. His body broke into motionless fragments, not in flesh, but in presence. There was no resistance, only release. The world realigned itself, and Elias gasped as his eyes opened. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. He was lying on a hospital bed, 4 in his arm, electrodes on his chest. The distant sound of a heart monitor beeped steadily beside him. His body ached, but not in the way it had in Naraka. This pain was dull, familiar, real. He turned his head and saw movement, doctors rushing through sliding doors, a nurse adjusting a monitor. A young physician stood at the foot of another bed, flipping rapidly through charts, voice tense, uncertain. She's unstable. If we intubate now, we risk. He hesitated. We risk losing the window. Elias pushed himself up slowly. No one noticed. He stood, walked forward. The young doctor didn't see him until Elias placed a steady hand on his shoulder. The boy froze. Elias didn't say much. He didn't have to. "Slow down," he said quietly. "You're not here to control her. You're here to help her stay." The doctor stared at him, stunned, and nodded once. Elias turned and walked down the corridor, each step light, controlled but not rigid. The weight that once drove every motion was no longer there. As the hallway stretched ahead, Elias paused beside a nurse, struggling to lift a fallen clipboard. He knelt, picked it up, and handed it to her without saying anything. She smiled. "Thank you." He froze for half a second. No one had said that to him in years. Not like that, not meaning it. He gave a quiet nod and kept walking. Ahead, through a glass window, he saw a patient unconscious on a table, surrounded by doctors frozen in hesitation. He opened the door halfway, looked at the lead surgeon, and said, "If she's still breathing, she's not lost." Then he closed the door and left them to do what he once refused to believe mattered.